Hello, hello, look, cute dungarees, nice outfit, covering it up with this because I'm cold. At least you've seen it, you know I have real clothes on, we're moving on. Hello, so if you follow me on social media, you may already know, but this month is Ehlers-Danlos Awareness Month, and you may also know that I was recently diagnosed. In order to, I guess, celebrate my diagnosis, I wanted to go through a timeline of symptoms and events and what led to my diagnosis and what that means for me, etc, etc. I have some notes, but I think I'm going to try and mainly stay off book and just do this from my mind. So if this is a little bit all over the place, then I do apologise. But yeah, we're gonna go for it. I just got cut off because my memory card is full, so we've got a new one in now. Let's hope this one works. This video's all over the place and we haven't even started yet. Okay, I'm going to attempt to go through everything chronologically, and I'm going to start with the first symptoms I remember and try and go through everything leading to today. So, the first symptoms I remember experiencing, I think I was about 7 years old, and I think it was when I hurt my knee in PE. It's the first thing I ever remember experiencing. I've spoken to the mother, and she says that she can't remember me talking about anything earlier than that. But I do also remember feeling pain and thinking, well, nothing's happening. Like, I'm not hurt. I haven't, there's nothing on the skin. I'm not, swelling up. There's nothing, dangerous. So I'm just gonna ignore it. I remember having that thought quite a few times, even when I was, at that age. I very specifically remember the bottom two of my ribs. I was sitting watching TV and the bottom two of my ribs were aching. And I remember the feeling being familiar, so I think I must have felt it quite a few times. This is the only specific memory I have of it. But thinking, there's nothing there. There's no point telling anyone and raising the alarm and making a fuss when I'm fine. It doesn't hurt to breathe, there's no swelling, there's no bruising. I'm fine. I don't know where this thought process came from. I wonder if maybe I had said these things in the past and people have been like, oh, well, there's nothing there, so you're okay. And I just sort of went, okay, well, that means that there's no point telling anyone about it because there's nothing that can be done, basically. And there's not anything physically wrong, it just hurts. The only exception to this I remember is when I hurt my knee. I remember standing up in PE and it just hurt. I don't know what was wrong with it. It was my left knee, which has always been my bad one. I just stood up funny in PE in primary school and my knee was just wrong. I can't tell you any other way to describe it other than it was wrong. And we had to walk up all of these stairs to get to the classroom because as you got older in the school, you got higher up. So I was in year 6 at the time, so I'd have been 10-ish when I did this. So, but I remember the rib pain from when I was about 7, I think. So yeah, this hurting my knee and walking upstairs and it just being it feeling wrong and it hurting a lot. And then it hurting for several days after. No, I was in year 5. Sorry, it's going to be all over the place. Yeah, and it just feeling wrong for ages. And I used to ask if I could sit on a chair instead of sitting, because we used to sit cross-legged on the carpet during lessons. And I used to ask if I could sit on a chair because I didn't like sitting on the floor. I also remember in assemblies around this time, we would have to, the whole school would once a day go and have these I think they were half an hour long assemblies where you'd have to sit cross-legged on this hard lino floor for half an hour. And it was pretty common that people would stand up and have dead legs, and sometimes people would stand up and then fall over, and this was pretty common. But it would happen to me every single time. Every single time I would stand up and be like, I can't feel one of my feet to the point where it is painful and I can't walk on it. And I would always dawdle and always be the last one out because it would always hurt. And I'd always be waiting for the pins and needles to go away and for the stiffness to go away before I'd be able to walk upstairs afterwards. And I'd tell people this and everyone would be like, yeah, that happens to everyone. I now recognise that it was probably happening to me at a higher level than everybody else. But again, I just didn't think anything of it because it happened to everyone, right? I think when I went into secondary school, there was more things kept appearing, but again, there wasn't any one specific thing that I could put my finger on. I can't really tell you the years of secondary school, they all kind of blur into one, to be honest. But I used to get headaches a lot. I'd be off school with a headache and I'd just have this headache all day. And the next day it would be gone. And that used to happen to me all the time. And I don't know what they were and I don't know what they were caused by, but it would just make me feel so ill for that day. I don't know if maybe they were migraines or whatever. But I remember that happening. I remember not sleeping at all. I would hardly sleep at all. I was a very anxious teenager, so this might have had something to do with it. But I remember like coming into school and being like, I've had like 3 hours sleep. I just could not sleep. And this happened to me quite often. I also remember my wrists and my ankles aching, especially at night, and it would keep me awake. And I would tell people about this and they'd be like, oh, it's growing pains. And I was like, well, it must be growing pains then. And I remember telling other people about this and then being like, I have no idea what you're talking about. But I just sort of ignored it. There was also like, we used to joke a lot in my friendship group that I was constantly ill. And I would constantly feel like a bit rubbish, like I would come in and feel like a bit crap. And there was this constant joke that like, Amy's always ill, constantly ill, blah blah blah, but it was always like this joke that none of us like took that seriously. And I also remember feeling like on the days where I'd come in and say that I was ill, I don't think I actually felt worse than on the normal days. I think those are the days where I just didn't have the energy to pretend. So I'd come in and I'd say, oh, I don't feel very well, and then I'd just have that cover for like the whole day of like if I, seemed like tired or whatever, I didn't have to pretend to not be tired because I said I felt ill. And I ended up doing this on more and more days. And I don't know if I was doing this because I was feeling rubbish because of the anxiety, if I was feeling rubbish because of all of this. I can't really remember the exact symptoms that caused me to do this, but I do remember not actually feeling more ill on the days that I said I was ill. I was just doing it so that I didn't have to pretend to not be ill. If that makes sense. Yeah, I think that about covers it. I do remember taking occasional days off for the same reason, just being like, I feel ill, I feel just as ill as I did yesterday, but I just can't be bothered to deal with the ill today, and then taking a day off school. I would always do the work, I'd do the work at home, but I did do that very, very occasionally. Very occasionally. At no point did I ever connect the dots that, again, we did joke about that, oh, there's definitely something wrong with Amy, but it was always a joke, and also, like, I don't know if I didn't really believe it, or I just didn't want to believe it, but yeah, it was kind of a thing that we would joke about, and it just never, I don't know, never led to anything, never made me question anything, apart from once. So I think this is coming to the end of my time at secondary school. I was watching a YouTuber a lot called Made You Look, who's still on YouTube, still fantastic, who is diabetic. And a lot of the things that she was saying about being diabetic, I related to. I now realise that the things that she was talking about were just like generic chronic illness things. So I went to the doctors to get tested for diabetes because I was like, well, if I relate to all of this, then why do I relate to this, basically? So I went and got a blood test for it and they said that I didn't have it and they left it at that. They shouldn't have left it at that. I was telling them that I was experiencing these symptoms. They shouldn't have ignored that. But yeah, I wasn't diabetic, and I also, this was my first experience of being not so fond of doctors. I remember telling this to the doctor and I could see in his face that he was trying not to laugh at me. I think he obviously knew that I wasn't diabetic, but as soon as anxiety was mentioned in this meeting, because I was quite an anxious teenager, and the second that we said that, you could see he was trying not to laugh. He was trying to blow it off as anxiety almost immediately. Even though the symptoms I was telling him were real and they weren't made up. And yeah, I felt rubbish leaving that. I remember feeling like I was stupid. And I also remember thinking, okay, well, why am I feeling these things then? If it's not that, then why am I feeling these things? But I just didn't pursue it. But we're going to pause this because my landlord has just pulled up. Okay, my landlord has left. He was fixing some blinds, so I didn't want background noise. But, okay, where were we? I think we'd finished talking about secondary school. I can't really think of anything else that happened at secondary school. I know that I did hurt my coccyx, which is the little bone right at the very end of your spine. I kicked it while I was on the trampoline with the heel of my foot. 0 out of 10 would not recommend. It still hurts to this day, probably over 10 years later. I don't remember how old I was when I did it. I do remember it taking a long time to heal, and I do remember it never being fully right, and it still isn't fully right now. It hurts when I sit in certain seats. Sometimes it just aches for no reason whatsoever. I have since heard that you can be hypermobile in your tailbone. Your tailbone can be slightly hypermobile, which makes me wonder if maybe that's what's causing the pain and not the injury. I went to physio for it. They said that I hadn't broken it. It wasn't out of place or anything, so I hadn't dislocated it. At least I hadn't at that point when I went to physio. It just hurt a lot for a long time. I don't actually know what I actually did. But yeah, it's never been fully right since I did that. This is also when I noticed that it takes me forever to heal from injuries. Injuries isn't even the right word. Scratches is probably the better word. Anything that breaks my skin to a, like, anything. Cat scratch, tiny little, like, I remember I had a scratch of a dog on my leg for like 6 or 7 months. Yeah, it just hangs around for forever. It basically 100% of the time, whenever I break my skin, will turn into a scar. Every single time. The scar will fade pretty quickly, but yeah, it always scars every single time. I don't get some of the more like intense scarring things that a lot of people with EDS get. However, I do get this thing where like it takes me forever to heal, and basically everything scars. I will say something which isn't particularly characteristic of EDS. Actually, two things that aren't particularly characteristic of EDS, but something that I started to notice when I was around this age. My skin never, ever, ever breaks. It is stretchy. It is. I'm one of you. People think this is gross, but I have really stretchy skin around my eyes as well. Super stretchy skin, which is an EDS thing. But I do not get the easy tearing of the skin that you quite often get with EDS. I get, to the freakish extent, the opposite, which is it never breaks. And I think that's because it is stretchy, like it stretches rather than tears, which is like tearing skin is an EDS thing I just don't experience. I also don't experience bruising, and I don't experience that again to a extreme level. I can whack anything, like whack my legs off my table, I can get a blood test, I can do anything, and I will not bruise ever. It will hurt, it'll still hurt to the touch like a bruise, and it will like ache like a bruise does, but you just do not get, like, I do not know why. I have never met anyone with EDS with this. It is an EDS characteristic to excessively bruise. Everyone I've ever spoken to with EDS has excessively bruised. I'm like the complete opposite of this. I have no idea why. And then we got into sixth form. I don't remember a lot of pain things in sixth form. I remember finding writing really difficult. I had to do a lot of handwriting stuff for revision, and my hands would suffer from this. I remember like my thumb would like stop moving. I think it was probably coming out of place, but I didn't know it at the time. And I remember being ill constantly, like constantly. I had permanent colds. Yeah, to the point where like I thought at one point that I might have had like mono or something else that was like a flu thing that lasted forever, because I would just get these colds and they would just last for months and months and months and never go away. So yeah, that was just ill permanently. I don't think I remember any other specific symptoms from sixth form other than like continuation of the old stuff, back hurting and things. I've always had like shoulder issues. I'm gonna get one now, so I'm gonna take this off. I've always had like shoulder and neck pain like for as long as I can remember. I don't know if this is just because in academia you have to sit a lot, but I don't hear other people talking about it as much as I do. I know people do experience like obviously like back pain and things, like it's not exclusive to me, but I experience it like almost constantly. Yeah, and I think that brings me to my gap year. Now that was when I started questioning things, because things started to get worse. I think this is probably because of the deconditioning of not being in college every day. I wasn't like walking around every single day, I wasn't going out every single day. I was exhausted in college. I would fall asleep in lessons all of the time, not on purpose, and I wouldn't even like properly fall asleep. It would be like so quick, like I physically couldn't stay awake. And luckily all my lectures were nice and I didn't miss anything important, so like it was fine, but it used to happen to me all the time. And I'd also get these, like, I have no idea what these are, but these like tiny absences, which other people have said that they've noticed as well, so this definitely happened. It still does happen occasionally where I just blank out. Hello, focus. What a mood though. I would just like, it would last like, I mean, I don't know how long it lasts because I had no concept of time, but it would last like maybe a second or two where I just like switch off. Brain is just like off. Like I have no memory of what happens in these. I don't even like see blackness because I don't see anything. There is like nothing there. I think they are maybe tiny absent seizures in what other people have experienced and what I've said, but I have like no, I only know that they've happened afterwards, and they, for some reason, will mainly happen when someone asks me a question, or maybe that's just when I notice they happen. But I would like have these moments of like someone would say something to me, and I must have just like blanked, like stared at them, no reaction, and I'd become aware again, and then they'd be like looking at me, or they'd repeat the question as if I hadn't heard them, and it would take me a second to like work out where I was, just like half a second to be like, okay, and then answer the question. But yeah, that used to happen to me quite a lot. I have no idea what caused that. Still happens sometimes. That's weird. If anyone has any suggestions about what that is, let me know down in the comments, because I have no idea. It doesn't happen as much, and a thing that doesn't happen anymore at all, but used to happen quite a lot, is that the world would go dark for like half a second. Like I'm talking like less than half, like a millisecond. Everything would go black, just like as if the lights had flashed on and off. And at first I thought the lights were just flickering, because that's what it felt like literally was like the lights flicked on and off, but like in my brain. And I'd say to people, no one would ever recognise, no one would ever be like, yeah, the lights just flickered. Like, immediate blackness and then it gone. It was so fast that most of the time I wouldn't think anything of it, and it took me a while to connect that like this was happening. I still don't know why. But yeah, that's the thing. If anyone has any suggestions, or if this happens to anyone else, could you let me know that I don't have a brain tumour, please? I know I don't have a brain tumour. I've had an MRI. That was... I know I don't have a brain tumour, but like why does that happen? So yeah, we get to my gap year. All of these things have been going on. Things have been getting worse because of deconditioning, and that's when I started to think that I might be hypermobile. I'd heard about this before. I don't remember the first time that I'd heard about it. I just remember hearing that it existed, looking up looking it up and finding out that the Baton score existed, and doing the Baton score, and not thinking I passed it, but that's only because I didn't understand what hypermobility looked like. I also didn't think I was hypermobile in my elbows until a physio told me I was. Literally a few months ago. So yeah, it took me a while to work out that that was what was going on, and I didn't really expect to do anything about it, or like get it diagnosed or anything, but I kind of been thinking about it, and then over the course of my gap year things were getting worse and worse and worse, and I think at that point that was when I was like, maybe I should see someone about this, because I'm pretty sure, I've looked it up and I'm pretty sure that I am hypermobile, and that's probably what's causing a lot of these issues. And like people around me would kind of know that I was like delicate and that things bothered me, and that I was like a bit weak and like not the best, but it was just like never spoken about. This was when, like, over my gap year, I'd started to sort of maybe connect the dots and be like, maybe there's something going on here. So when I started university, that was when I first went to the doctor. I went to the doctor twice to get my diagnosis of hypermobility. So this is where it starts to get a bit complicated. It wasn't complicated enough already. So I was diagnosed with benign joint hypermobility. This is not a thing that you can be diagnosed with. It is out of date. It is not considered a proper diagnosis anymore. It is an out of date diagnosis that should not be used, however is still used. So that was what was written on my medical certificate. This is when I started to do some research into it, and I found out that benign joint hypermobility is the same thing and is now considered hypermobile spectrum disorder. It's more complicated than that. I'm simplifying it here, but basically hypermobile spectrum disorder recognises that it is a system-wide thing that doesn't just affect your joints, even though it is like sort of diagnosed in the same way as benign joint hypermobility is. It was sort of changed to recognise that it is a full spectrum thing and should take into account other things other than just your joints. Because it should take into account things like pain. A lot of people are a bit hypermobile, but it doesn't cause pain, it doesn't cause some issues. So yeah, you should be diagnosed with hypermobile spectrum disorder, or HSD. I was very lucky that it only took me 2 appointments, which is like insane, to get diagnosed with any type of hypermobility. This was because I knew what I wanted when I came in. I immediately came in, did the test, and they just did it for me. They just like signed it off and put it on my certificate. They obviously didn't know exactly what they were doing, to be honest, because they didn't diagnose it with the thing that is actually a thing that you can be diagnosed with. But it was a start. It took me a while to realise that this was a thing that you shouldn't be diagnosed with, and about this other thing, but after doing some research it became clear to me that what I actually had was hypermobile spectrum disorder, because basically the other thing didn't exist. And I went into doctor's appointments and just started referring to it as that. Like, I just say it and I'd be like, oh, I'm diagnosed with this slash this, like the general hypermobility things. There's a bunch of different names for it, and I'd be very vague about what I called it. But if they wanted me to specifically put a word on it, I would call it HSD, because that is the most accurate diagnosis. And then it ended up just being like what my medical record said. That was just what ended up being put in my medical record. I don't know who changed it. I don't know if I said it and somebody else wrote that down and then that got it changed, or if somebody noticed it, or if maybe I said something in an appointment that prompted it to be changed, but it changed. The old one was taken off, HSD was put on. So yeah, that was the story of how I got diagnosed with HSD, sort of. And that is when it gets a bit complicated. So that was all in my first year. I was getting a bunch of blood tests, getting a bunch of things checked out. There was a whole thing where there was something wrong with my kidneys. I'm not going to go into that. They're fine now, I think. But yeah, I'm only touching on the basics of what you need for this, and this is already going to be very long, so I'm skipping a lot of symptoms and a lot of tests and a lot of appointments here. But that was when I started to do some research into things that would help, because it became very clear to me that I wasn't going to get any help from the doctors, and that the only help I was going to be able to get was stuff that I could find myself. So I ended up looking into stuff, and that was when I found out about EDS, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, and about how it is a rarer form of HSD, except it's a different thing. Again, it's really complicated. But that was when I found out about it, and I started doing some research and like watching a bunch of YouTubers and like following a bunch of people on Instagram, and I started to be like, actually, I relate to a lot of this. A lot of what is being said, I really relate to. I'm experiencing a lot of these symptoms, and they are getting worse, because they were getting worse. They are still getting worse. And yeah, I relate a lot to this. And I did a whole bunch, this was over years, I'm really simplifying this here, did a whole bunch of research into like what the diagnostic criteria is, what the differences are, etc, etc, and I came to the conclusion that I would probably be better off having an EDS diagnosis, because that is more accurate. But that wasn't everything that I was concerned with. I thought it was more accurate to my condition. I looked through the diagnostic criteria and I matched it, I fit it. And yeah, I fit the criteria. It didn't seem more complicated than that to me. I went through the criteria and I fit it. There was a bunch that require very specific tests. I hadn't had those tests, so it might even be that I fit in other ways. There was a bunch of things going on. Nothing incredibly serious, but yeah, there was a whole bunch of things going on, and basically this is what I thought I had. So that was when I started asking doctors about it. Now this was when it got complicated, because at this point, basically doctors wouldn't tell me either way. They wouldn't say yes or no. They would basically tell me that, that it's the same thing, that HSD and EDS are the same thing, they're not. Or that they weren't qualified to diagnose it, or they'd just be like, yeah, you seem to have read a lot, and then sort of change the subject. Or they would just straight up go like, well, you're not that bad. Or you could just have normal pain, or like everyone experiences this, and or my favourite one, it's just anxiety. That's a whole other video. Yeah, we're summarising this very, very briefly. Whole other like 3 years of appointments later, and eventually I see a rheumatologist. Yes, at this point I still hadn't seen a rheumatologist. So I went to rheumatology about 2 months ago, and that was when I brought up EDS. I told them all my symptoms. We went through everything again. And he told me that they wouldn't diagnose EDS. He said, we don't diagnose EDS, we only care about the types of it that are more dangerous. There is 14 different types, I think. They only care about the types that are more life-threatening, was what he told me. He said they won't diagnose it. He didn't say that I didn't have it, he didn't even look at the criteria. And I left this appointment and I was just thinking, do you know what? No. I want someone to sit with me through the criteria. The rheumatologist was supposed to be my chance at the diagnosis. That's what I was told by the consultant. That's what I was told by the doctors. What I was told by people online. That this was the time to get the answer. And he just wouldn't give me it. He didn't say I didn't have it. He said he wouldn't even look at it. So I was just like, no, I'm not having this. And about a week after the appointment, I called PALS, which is the complaints unit. I didn't make a complaint. I just told them that I would. I told them that if this wasn't sorted, I was going to make a complaint, because why did he say just didn't diagnose this? Like, what are you here for? Isn't that your job? So I got a phone call appointment with him about a month after that, which was about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and we went through everything, and I explained to him why I thought it was important that I got this diagnosis, why I thought it fit me better, etc, etc, and he was like, actually yeah, I do think you've got it. After we'd spoken everything through, he agreed that he thinks that I have hypermobile type Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, and I won't show you my address, but today I got the letter through confirming it. This has also been sent to my doctors. I've got a copy of this. My doctor's got a copy of this. We finally have it on paper. Finally have the diagnosis. Okay, so this video is always going to be so long, and there's so many more things that I could talk about. But yeah, that is how we got to today. That is how we got to the diagnosis. I was planning on talking about what that means for me and like tips for getting diagnosed, but like this is already really long and I have work to do and my voice is getting tired, so I'm gonna call this it. I might turn those other things into other videos. Let me know what you'd like to know down in the comments. Let me know questions and I'll turn them into other videos, but this is getting ridiculous. So we're gonna go here. Yeah. The moral of the story is keep trying, I guess. Or so that you're gonna complain. Because that's what worked for me. Okay, I'm gonna go. If you have any requests or questions, then leave them down in the comments. New videos every Wednesday, like, subscribe and all that jazz, and I'll see you next week. Also, I will link a bunch of resources down in the comments about EDS and about HSD. You can read them all in more detail. I will link people who have it if you want to know like more like real life experiences of people with it. Yeah, bunch of information down in the description. Have a look. Okay, bye.